Caffeine is the world's most commonly used psychoactive substance. It occurs naturally in over 60 plants. Some of the most well-known ones include cocoa beans, tea leaves, and of course, coffee beans. Synthetic caffeine can also be added to products to enhance stimulant effects. It is hard to say for sure when it was found. Some anthropologists say that it may have happened as early as 700,000 BC. Early Stone Age men probably chewed the seeds, roots, barks, and leaves of caffeine-yielding plants. However, Friedrich Ferdinand Runge was the first one to isolate caffeine from coffee in 1819.
Wow, Eileen, great coffee. I've always wondered how it works. You're taking Pharmacology 201, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how coffee works?
Yeah, I think I've learned a thing or two this semester. Let's go to the whiteboard.
To understand this, let's look at ATP, the energy currency for all cells of the body. When phosphate groups are cleaved, energy is released from ATP. Then we are just left with adenosine. When adenosine binds to adenosine receptors, it causes an inhibitory effect on cellular activity, which allows cellular energy stores to refuel and replenish. This causes you to feel tired. When we look at the molecular structures of caffeine and adenosine, we can see the similarities outlined in green. This allows caffeine to bind to adenosine receptors. Caffeine is an adenosine receptor antagonist. This means that although it can bind to the adenosine receptors, it does not produce any response. The adenosine receptor would not be able to respond to reduced ATP levels, and so the cells will continue to deplete energy stores and neurons will continue to fire, postponing fatigue. Over time, the body will respond to this by making more adenosine receptors, which means you will need to consume more caffeine to achieve the same effect and fight off fatigue.
So interesting, Eileen. So what effect does caffeine have on my body?
Let's take a look.
The primary effect of caffeine is that it stimulates the central nervous system. This looks like decreased fatigue, increased mental alertness and concentration, improved performance on motor and memory tasks, constriction of cerebral blood vessels, which relieves headaches, stimulates acid release from gastric mucosa, and increases heart rate and blood pressure.
Wow, that's really interesting, Eileen. But can you overdose on caffeine?
It is very hard to overdose on caffeine. Toxic doses start at about 10 grams. For reference, your average cup of coffee at Starbucks has 150 milligrams of caffeine. But as you start to increase caffeine intake, some other effects start to occur that can explain the side effects we see, such as phosphodiesterase inhibition, which prevents inhibition of sympathetic stimulation, GABA antagonism, which prevents inhibition of the central nervous system activity, and calcium release, which leads to increased cardiac and smooth muscle contractility.
So Eileen, what are some of the side effects of coffee?
Let's take a look, shall we?
All right.
Some side effects of caffeine include irritability, anxiety, restlessness, confusion, insomnia, seeing flashes, ringing of the ears, and increased heart rate, which can lead to tremors at high doses, as well as frequent urination and a mild diuretic effect, although that is not as relevant when it is consumed as a beverage, such as coffee.
So Eileen, I know coffee wakes me up in the morning, but what else could it be used for?
Let's go see.
Caffeine is used for postponing fatigue when studying for a big test, treating orthostatic hypotension. It is added to painkillers like ibuprofen, and used to treat newborn respiratory disorders like apnea of prematurity and bronchopulmonary dysplasia. Some lesser-known uses of caffeine include diet suppressant, beauty treatment of cellulite and reduction of eye contour pigmentation and puffiness, as well as pesticide. Some people also use it to treat asthma, since caffeine can be considered a weak bronchodilator.
So Eileen, I drink a cup of coffee almost every single morning. Does that mean I could be addicted to it?
No, although you could develop a dependence. However, caffeine is not presently classified as an addictive substance, although people do call themselves addicted to caffeine. Since it is legal, it does not generally affect your social, economical, or physical well-being.
But what about my caffeine withdrawal?
Yeah, caffeine withdrawal is certainly real and can lead to things like fatigue and irritability. However, those things can be easily alleviated with a cup of coffee.
Awesome. Now, Eileen, I've heard that pregnant women can't drink caffeine. Why is that?
To understand this, let's look at caffeine metabolism. CYP1A2 is responsible for most of the caffeine metabolism, which means that any changes to it will cause a change in the half-life of caffeine. Pregnant women have a longer half-life of caffeine, which means the effects of caffeine will be longer on her and her fetus. Since caffeine may affect brain development, that is why they advise pregnant women to not consume too much caffeine. As well, cigarette smoking increases CYP1A2 activity, which may explain the higher rate of caffeine consumption among smokers. Further, substantial alcohol intake as well as oral contraceptives increase the half-life of caffeine and decrease its clearance. There are certain medications such as antiarrhythmics, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, quinolones, and bronchodilators that are known inhibitors of CYP1A2, which means that caffeine will have a longer half-life when taken with those medications.
Wow, Eileen, thank you